Good morning. Happy New Year. Nice to see you all. Today is Tuesday, January 21st at 9:05 a.m. I'm calling the meeting to order. First, I'd like to introduce our board members. To my far left is Board Member Dee Dee D'Adamo. To her right, Vice Chair Fran Spivey Weber. To my right, Board Member Tam Dodek. And to her right, Board Member Steve Moore. Mr. Howard, will you introduce the staff?
Yes, thank you. Assisting the board today are Janine Townsend and Courtney Davis. To my left, Chief Counsel Michael Lawfer. To my right, Chief Deputies John Bishop and Karen Turgovich.
Thank you. Now, I know this is a particularly full of veterans of our procedures, but for those of you who haven't been here or for our colleagues who haven't been there, I need to go through the emergency evacuation procedures. Just look for the exit. You hear a sound that sounds like an emergency sound. It probably is, unless somebody has a really awful ringtone, but you'll probably be able to tell. Go out. You can go wherever you want. The staff will be convening in Cesar Chavez Park across the street. If you want to know when it's safe to come back, you'll stay with us. Otherwise, you can do whatever you like. Obey traffic signals. Be careful. Take your stuff. Of even greater import or likelihood, when you come up to speak, know that the meeting is being webcast and recorded. So try to speak into the microphone. It's important to get as close to it as you can. You can see the difference. I'm not very good at this. So please try to do that. And also please put any notifications, smartphones, etc. on silent so you don't disturb other folks in the meeting. With that, we're ready for the public forum, and we can hear from anybody who wants to speak about any matter that is not pending before the board today. All right. And we'll move on to, what, somebody? Oh, great, hi. Hi, Andrew.
We have public forum cards, right?
We do.
Hello. Is it okay? Okay.
Sorry.
My name is Andrea Ventura, and I am here on behalf of Clean Water Action and our affiliate Clean Water Fund. And I'm here, I actually gave copies to Ms. Townsend. I'm here today to present the board and staff with a report recently released by our organization that you will, as you will see, is focused on how our state is addressing our polluted waters.
Right.
And sadly, I think that we are not probably doing as well as any of us would like to be doing. Currently, more than 1,800 California water body pollutant combinations violate state and federal water quality standards, and it will require an estimated 400 TMDLs developed over 13 years to address them. And this does not take into account, of course, new and emerging pollution problems that may end up being the 303D listings of the future. Despite tremendous efforts on the part of this board and our regional boards, spending millions of dollars, we continue to face this problem. According to the U.S. EPA, in the 40 years since the Clean Water Act was established, California has none of California's recognized polluted waters have been completely cleaned up to support their beneficial uses. So my purpose here today is, of course, not to just criticize, but to present you with our findings. It is the result of the experiences and perspectives of both environmental and environmental justice groups who are veterans of TMDL processes. It outlines 11 problem areas that we believe prevent us from achieving better outcomes for our waterways. I'll just give one example. Obviously can't go through all 11 of them in a short period of time, but probably the first and foremost is the traditional TMDL, single contaminant, single water body approach that really limits our positive results would be a good example. Can I have just another 2 minutes, maybe? Yeah. Okay. Oh. This document also presents 18 recommendations to reform our water remediation programs. Some of them are quite specific in nature. Others are more general policy changes that we would recommend. Again, key amongst them would be to look beyond the traditional TMDL approach, identify opportunities to employ broader systemic strategies to addressing water quality impairments. These would include seeking, when appropriate, regional or statewide strategies, addressing multiple contaminants, and cleanup or pollution prevention options that provide multiple benefits, just as examples. As I said, this is an action plan. It represents the thinking of the public interest community. And while we do stand behind our recommendations and advocate strongly for their implementation, we realize that doing so in the most effective way possible will require discussion and collaboration with other interested parties, including this board. Articulating our thinking is our way of starting that conversation. We are very aware that many of the issues we raise in these pages are things that you yourselves are also thinking about. We're heartened by that. And we do see this board having taken some important steps to take a broader and fresher approach. For instance, I can only point to the statewide trash program that we have been very involved in. Efforts in the Central and Valley and Central Coast to control agricultural non-point source pollution, and initial postings of online progress reports on specific TMDL implementation. These are very laudable steps, but I hope you will agree that they are only first steps, and we need to think broader, bigger, and more creatively. We need nothing less than major reform on how we approach our water pollution so that we are more efficient and comprehensive in our approach, and so that we respond to the human right to clean water for all Californians, and that in the end, we put the water's needs first. None of this is easy, but we are, and by that I mean Clean Water Action and our allies, are ready to work with you and the regional boards to bring about that reform. And with that, I will close, and thank you for your indulgence.
Good. Well, thank you. I don't know if people have any questions. At the moment, we haven't had a chance to read it.
Sure.
So we'll look forward to reading it and look forward to the discussion, because we certainly are of like mind. So
I assume
well.
you're sending this out to the regions as well.
We will be sending it out to the regions, at least the
You've got a lot of them in the room today, so.
They know it's
have you
coming.
brought extra copies?
I have some in the car, but not enough to go around. But I will be sending them to the chairs of all the regional boards as well as the executive officers. And then it's also online, and we will make sure people know how to access it that way as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Andrea. I also have a request. The board adopted a resolution last year that directed staff to work with the TMDL roundtable to sort of, again, look at the issues of TMDLs. Where do we go? How do we improve? How do we, implement TMDLs in a way that achieve multiple benefits? And so I would request that you also share this and perhaps meet with the TMDL roundtables as part of the discussion process.
I would love to be able to do that, and we'll work to make that happen. That's a very good recommendation. I appreciate that. Okay.
Great. Thanks. Nice
Thank
to see
you
you.
very much for hearing me out and
Sure.
for taking a look when you have a chance.
Great. Thank you. We'll look forward to the discussions. Next, we have John Giesman for the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm John Giesman, an attorney representing the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility. With me is Rochelle Becker, the Executive Director of the Alliance, and a member of your Once-Through Cooling Review Committee for Nuclear Power Plants. We want to thank you for the opportunity to address you today, and thank John Bishop for inviting us to do so. We're here to encourage you to allow Bechtel a little more time to complete its report on alternatives to once-through cooling at the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant. According to the Friends of the Earth, with San Onofre out of the picture, Diablo Canyon now accounts for 78% of the once-through cooling flows in California. The biological significance of your widely heralded OTC policy will hinge on how it is applied to this particular plant. When Bechtel's draft report was released last fall, PG&E publicly declared that it will comply with the once-through cooling policy. Like most other PG&E customers, I trust the company about as far as I can throw it. But PG&E should be commended for at least promising to do the right thing. Let me be clear about how the OTC policy would affect Diablo Canyon. Because Diablo Canyon does not have to come into compliance until December 31st, 2024, current operations will not be impacted at all. The policy would restrict flows during the last 8 months of Unit 2's license, but otherwise does not kick in unless PG&E revives its suspended relicensing application and is successful in getting the NRC to extend the existing licenses beyond their current 2024 and 2025 expiration dates. The OTC policy has no bearing on the current controversy within the NRC over the shoreline fault and whether the safe shutdown earthquake requirement is being properly enforced. Nor is there any direct connection to PG&E's defiance since 2008 of directives from the California Energy Commission to accelerate the transfer of spent fuel from wet pools to dry casks, although some cooling water flow will be required to maintain the spent fuel pools after the plant closes. As PG&E slowly evaluates the extent of seismic retrofits likely to be needed at Diablo Canyon to meet post-Fukushima requirements, it is quite possible that the plant will close before it reaches its OTC compliance date. By California standards, this rapidly aging plant is approaching the end of its actuarial survivorship projection. Think about what percentage of licensed life expectancy each of California's other 7 reactors actually achieved. Santa Susana, 17%. Vallecillos, 30%. Humboldt Bay, 32%. Rancho Seco, 35%. San Onofre Unit 1, 62%. San Onofre Unit 2, 71%. San Onofre Unit 3, 70%. Diablo Unit 1 is already at 73%, and Unit 2 is at 71%. If this plant is still operating when the OTC compliance date comes around, they'll be calling it Old Methuselah. Under the circumstances, it seems reasonable to allow Bechtel a little more time to finish its review of once-through cooling alternatives at Diablo Canyon. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giesman. Ms. Becker, do you have a question?
Can I just, John, when would we need to, do we need to act on that, or when?
So
if we,
there is
so
a
when?
requirement that, that a final report from the nuclear, the contractor for the Nuclear Review Committee be submitted, I believe it was in December. We are already past that due. I've taken it on my own authority to give them some extra time, and we're evaluating how much time they would need at this point. I expect to get a request in the next few weeks on what it would take.
All right, and then you'll be coming back to us
I'll
with
be
a
letting you know,
recommendation
yes.
and options and the whole thing?
That's correct.
All right. Ms. Becker?
Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Rochelle Becker, and I'm the Executive Director of the Alliance for Nuclear Responsibility, and I'm also a resident of San Luis Obispo County and a PG&E ratepayer. When we first came before this board, when the federal government announced its policy, we made one recommendation. We recommended that you not build any alternatives to once-through cooling at Diablo Canyon, and that you simply require that this plant no longer operate once its license was up. The licenses are up in 2024 and 2025. That's what the state anticipated when it gave PG&E a license. There were no license renewals at that time. We now know that when San Onofre closed, the once-through cooling issues virtually ended. That's what could happen at Diablo Canyon in 2024 and 2025. However, if you don't make this statement, if we don't start in the state of California to let them know that the handwriting's on the wall, we will be spending more and more money for a plant that may or may not operate. It's really time to look at the economics of this, look at the environmental degradation of the alternatives and the economics of building the alternatives, and basically say, you may operate till the end of your license. That's what the state promised you. And if PG&E decides that they can operate till the end of their license, they can do so. but you will not operate longer than that because the environmental degradation and the cost of this project are beyond reasonable. They are beyond prudent, and they are beyond what is in the best interest of the state of California. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that, after the close of public comments, it's time for board member reports. We haven't met in a while, so I know you've been busy, so be selective, please. Minutes. Why am I doing that this morning? I need coffee. Sorry.
So moved for adoption of the December 3rd, 2013 minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, minutes are approved. Now, board member reports. I'll start on the left today.
I just attended Region 4's planning meeting and Region 7's regular board meeting this month in January. And the planning meeting, many of the regions do planning meetings, and I think it's a good way for all of us to get a sense of what they're doing. But it's also the sort of thing that maybe it's something that could be in the executive director's report as to what are the kind of big high ticket items for each region in the future. So let's talk about that. And for Region 7, they went meticulously over the performance report, which was very encouraging, and are really trying to get a grip on their performance and how it's being portrayed, and what changes they might need to make, and what changes they might make recommendations to us for. So good work.
So I didn't really come prepared. It's been a while since we met, and I didn't get a chance to go through my calendar. So I'm going to just maybe mention something that I've been doing recently, and that is last week attended 2 community forums on CDFA's task force report on nitrogen tracking and reporting for high-risk areas. And so the first meeting was with environmental stakeholders, and the second meeting was with dairy. And then this week we will have, I suspect, a very lively one in the valley for commodities. And the meetings overall have been going very well, and this is an opportunity for, the report is final, but it's an opportunity for folks to review the report and provide comments. So the comments will be attached to the report once we receive it officially.
Great. Thank you so much for covering that all so closely.
Just something that occurred to me, a follow-up to something Fran had mentioned with respect to regional board plannings. I know that ORP staff, ORPP, Office of Research Planning and Performance staff, has been working on the 2013 Accomplishments and Priorities report. And so part of that will be a discussion of the regional board priorities for 2014. I would suggest that when that report is finalized, that as one of our state board member priority discussion, we take a look at the regional board's priorities and have a discussion about, resources, guest performance measures for those priorities, but Fran is right in that we do need to take more of an interest in the regional board priorities and how to best position and help them accomplish those priorities.
That's great.
All right. That sounds good. In December, I attended the Central Coast Water Board meeting. It was a packed agenda. There were TMDLs and an aquaculture general permit, reissuance, and updates on various programs that they're keeping very busy in Region 3 with their discharges for irrigated lands program, cooperative groundwater monitoring, et cetera. But I will highlight a status report that was given by the Central Coast Low Impact Development Initiative, or LIDI. And the Central Coast Water Board established this in 2008 to support the implementation of low impact development throughout the Central Coast, but also with statewide applicability, really working on some of the nuts and bolts of engineering plans and details. By mimicking natural site hydrology and pollutant removal, LID is an improvement to stormwater management, and so it's consequently required by our State Board Phase 2 statewide permit for post-construction stormwater control. What was very interesting in the status report was an observation that the Highway 101 corridor south of Salinas is expected to endure explosive growth in the urban areas in the next decade or so. And these urban areas that are near agriculture happen to overlay strategic locations for groundwater recharge and more sustainable long-term storage and reliability of water supply. In addition to this, they're low, disadvantaged communities for the most part, and so this is an opportunity to achieve multiple benefits by implementing low-impact development principles as these cities grow, and you can then have more of a green, pleasant, urban environment as you, and also protect water quality and water supply reliability and achieve multiple benefits. So I believe the LIDI, the Low Impact Development Initiative, is keying in onto some forward-thinking, important planning concepts that have statewide significance. On December 12th, Chief Counsel Michael Laufer and I both spoke at the County Councils Association of California Land Use Study Section Conference, and the focus of that panel that we served on was nitrates in groundwater, and I spoke specifically on the roles of public participation and the scientific and technical realities in the evolving policies in this crucially important area that relates to the human right to safe and affordable drinking water. So I thought it was a good panel. There was good discussions. We also shared the panel with Sandy Schubert of the Department of Food and Ag and other representatives of the local counties. So it was a good dialogue, and I look forward to more of those. And thanks
Great, thank you.
for the opportunity to report.
Terrific. I'm just going to mention a couple of things. One is that the proposed merger of the drinking water program with the State Water Board, the drinking water program from the Department of Public Health in the Health and Human Services Agency, is continuing apace. It was in the governor's proposed budget, and we held, after holding a whole series of task force meetings that were very well attended by the board members. Thank you all very much. We had a public hearing which was attended by all the board members, duly noticed, and that went very well as well. So I just want to thank everyone on staff and the board and in the Cosmos for working on that really important project, including Omar Carrillo, who I see in the back of the room, who's been a real leader in that work. So thank you for all the time you all have spent and you will be spending in the course of the coming weeks and months. The other issue that people have spent a lot of time on and will be spending even more time on in the coming weeks and months is the drought. And unfortunately, since it hasn't rained, we are starting to swing into gear with the variety of things that one does in a drought, in addition to praying for rain, which of course is important, but you can't count on it. And as you all know, the governor issued a drought proclamation on Friday. It has a number of directives to us, things we are already working on, which includes facilitating transfers, looking under the couch cushions for any ways we can facilitate funding for water conservation, water recycling, and other projects that might actually break ground this year, and taking a hard look at our standards, which are implemented through water rights, which was meant for a time that wasn't as extraordinarily dry. And so we are in conversation with other operations agencies and the fish agencies, and just stay tuned. We will be having an informational workshop on this in February so that we can talk about all of our processes, everything that's going on, but also ask people for suggestions, creative suggestions, in addition to just pulling out the old playbooks to figure out how we manage through what will be a very, very challenging time for people all over California, and critters too. So just again, my thanks to everyone who spent a lot of time on that, and more importantly, my thanks in advance for all of the time, good thinking, and creativity that we all will be spending with our heads and our hearts, because it will be quite the challenge. With that, let's move on to our agenda. I will say we have a big agenda today. We have a workshop tomorrow on another large topic. So we're potentially going to have a very long day. It's always hard to know. Some of our items could take a long time, some may not. One never knows. So just to give you a little bit of advanced planning, I can't be precise, but we will take a mid-morning break at some point, sometime between 10 and 11, probably a little closer to 11. And then if it looks as if we won't be able to conclude by 1 o'clock, we'll take a short lunch break, perhaps 30 minutes to 45 minutes. The little cafe downstairs is really quite good. If anybody has a blood sugar issue, they have nuts and other things you can grab during the mid-morning break. But I really don't have any way of knowing how long today will go, so we'll try and move it along while also just taking all the time we need to on the issues that are in front of us. So with that, we're going to start with items 3 through 5, which would be taken on and voted on together unless there's a request to remove them from the uncontested item calendar. Anyone like to take anything off? Any cards? No cards. All right. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Move adoption of items 3 through 5.
I'll second, and I just want to commend staff on these efforts at the regional level. We don't often give them enough time to really communicate how much we appreciate the work. And we heard about the TMDL program and its imperfections, I'll say. The item 3 is a great TMDL because it takes into account those multiple benefits. I just want to really commend San Diego region for the Penasquitos sediment TMDL. It's going to have multiple benefits on multiple pollutants. Second.
That was great, and how topical given our first public comment. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, any opposition? Didn't hear any. All right, moving right along. Now to item 6, one of our big meaty topics for today. It's an informational item, but very significant. Mr. Howard, would you like to introduce the item?
Yes, thank you. This is an informational item on the CV Salts program, Central Valley Salinity Alternatives. Jeannie Chilcott and Patrick Palupa will be presenting. This is an annual follow-up to an allocation of cleanup and abatement account money that the board provided the Central Valley several years ago to move this program forward.
And I promise to drink this coffee as fast as I can. I'm totally focused. I am an addict. I'm sorry. I just didn't have it this morning.
Good. There we go. Good morning, Chair Marcus, members of the board. My name's Jean Chilcott. I'm a senior environmental scientist with the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board in Rancho Cordova. Today, Debbie Webster, the vice chair of the CV Salts Executive Committee, and David Corey, the chair of the Central Valley Salinity Coalition, and I will be providing you the annual update for the CV Salts Initiative. The Central Valley Salinity Alternatives for Long-Term Sustainability, or CV Salts, is a collaborative basin planning effort. The ultimate goal is to utilize a stakeholder process to develop a salinity and nitrate management plan. Now, portions of those plans will address components required of the recycled water policy, but the plan's actually bigger than just looking for ways of conserving water. And the reason is twofold. The first reason is the Central Valley already has salt issues. There's more salt entering the valley than leaving the valley. We have the Sacramento River Basin where the salt and water flows into the delta. We have hydrologic modifications that pull water out of the delta and redistribute it throughout California, including into the San Joaquin River Basin, where we now have an imbalance of salt with more salt entering the river than entering the San Joaquin River Basin than leaving the basin in the delta. And we have the Tulare Lake bed, which is a closed basin, so any salt that goes there stays there. The impacts, we have both current impacts and legacy impacts. We have impacts to agricultural production, and we have increasing salt putting land out of production. We have increased salinity in our drinking water supplies, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide. There's direct economic costs. We had a study done by UC Davis. We have direct annual costs that by 2030 is estimated to be an annual cost of $1.5 billion. Statewide annual income impact by 2030 could be up to $3 billion a year. And the sources are extremely diverse. Salt is conservative. All of us use salt. When you use water, some salt is left behind. So it's really an issue of managing the salt. The second part of the issue is nitrate. Nitrate is a salt, but it has different issues, and there are legacy conditions throughout the valley. This particular slide is from some of the technical work that was completed this year. What you're looking at are blocks, 5 square mile blocks, where at least one well had nitrate concentrations, and those red areas are the ones where that well actually had nitrate above the drinking water standard. So you can see that nitrate is a widespread problem. We have direct impacts that we know of to our drinking water constituencies that are using this groundwater. We have economic costs for either treatment or finding alternate water supplies. And again, we have diverse sources. This can be agriculture, including dairies. It can be septic systems, industry. There are a number of different sources that have contributed in the past and continue to contribute. We're grappling with the current discharges now with many of our regulatory programs, but we still have these legacy issues that we need to address. So since, again, it's diverse sources, diverse issues, back in 2006 there was a joint planning workshop where all the stakeholders gathered to try to figure out how are we going to move forward and address this issue. There were some initial products done, including the economic study that I mentioned. And in 2009, the stakeholders, the dischargers, formed the Central Valley Salinity Coalition. And the state board, Central Valley Water Board, and that coalition signed a memorandum of agreement to agree to work together in this stakeholder effort. And it would be the stakeholders themselves through the coalition that really directed the project and provided funding to the project to move forward and find a sustainable and environmentally and economically sustainable solution for managing salt and nitrate in the Central Valley. The state board stepped in and provided some seed money for the effort. There were 2 different resolutions. The first one was $1.2 million. It was signed in 2009, right after the MOA was agreed to. And there was another $3.8 million that was made available in 2010. $2 million of that was allowed to be put into the project immediately, but $1.8 million was set aside and held to make sure that there was progress being made before additional money was let into the project. In last December of 2012, we had an annual report, and you found that we had made substantial progress, and you did release that $1.8 million. So the state board's contribution has been $5 million to date as seed money for this effort. With that 2010 resolution, there were specific requirements, and one of those is this annual report at a public hearing where we identify the expenditures to date, the services provided, the contribution from the stakeholders who are managing and funding this effort, the accomplishments, and how our timeline is laid out to complete the work. So now I'd like to switch to Debbie Webster, and she will take on a few of those issues.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and board members. Excuse the froggy voice. I ate a few frogs this morning, but I will hopefully make this through okay. I am the vice chair of the CV Salts Executive Committee. I also am the executive officer for SWRCB, and so I'm really happy to present some of the things that we've been doing. This is a joint effort. It's as we talk about funding, certainly the $5 million in seed money has been really important. I want to show you what we've done, but there's been significant stakeholder contributions, and I want to start by introducing the Central Valley Salinity Coalition. We started in 2008 with 4 members. We now have over 28 members and are continuing to grow. Our members include water and wastewater, agriculture producers and processors, industry groups, and others. And we are a diverse group. We are a committed group. These stakeholders, plus a few more, also contribute to projects which you'll see accounted for separately, because sometimes the money goes through this coalition, and sometimes it just goes directly or indirectly to help CV salts. So this is where we are so far. We've spent over $15 million so far in developing the salt and nutrient management plan and other associated works that have been needed in order to support this project. There has been over $2.5 million from the cleanup and abatement, plus over $2.5 million from the coalition, have all gone towards basin planning efforts. There's the additional stakeholder contributions, which we'll go into a little bit more, have been critical in helping us complete our work, informing it, making sure that we are able to make a plan that really is going to work. So far with the cleanup and abatement, here's a list of items. I want to highlight a few of these, and David's going to highlight a few, go into these a little bit more. But with our initial conceptual model, we have done a lot of GIS work that has that dovetails with what the state board is doing in its work in modeling and being able to identify and use that information to address those specifically critical areas, to look at what we can do there, what kind of capacity there is, where those where we need to focus our attention first. In the S salts, and I will tell you what that means, so everybody knows we like acronyms. So that is the Strategic Salt Accumulation and Land Transport Study. This is critical. We need to know what to do with our salts, where to put them, how we're going to manage them. And S salts is really a collaborative effort. What we did is the stakeholders have really put into identifying and doing the pilots on the ground. And then through cleanup and abatement funding, we have been able to bring that into a report and do an assessment as to what really is effective, what's cost effective, look for some of those low-hanging fruits. And so this is the first phase of it. There's some more phases to come. I also want to highlight the sequence-scoping sessions. Jeannie did an excellent job and had 4 very well-attended scoping sessions, and brought people that knew a lot about CV salts and those that knew nothing a better understanding of what happened there. I think it got more people interested in what was going on. Certainly, it just did a fabulous job, and it's an important issue, so we were really glad to see that kind of participation. Okay, so here's some of the things that we are currently working on. The last slide was things that we have finished. This is some things that we are currently working on. I want to reiterate that on some of this, the GIS work that we're doing, we're in trying to, again, hone in on what the right solutions are, what we need to be doing. David's going to talk a little bit about some of the policy discussions that we've been having that are foundational to the basin plan changing and what kind of plans that we have. The other important thing to highlight in here is we do take nitrate in the Central Valley very seriously, and we are looking and planning for early implementation for those disadvantaged communities in safe drinking water, and that is part of our process. Okay, so if we look at just the stakeholder contributions, and this is through a little more than 2014, just for that, what we've supported here, and then some of the backgrounds, there's over $15 million that has been spent. And in some of these, I can tell you in the lower half of these, as we look at treatment alternative and water quality, that's not even touching the surface of what's been doing. This has been an expensive process. It is an important process, and so the commitment is really there. We also, and I think that this is shown best on this next slide, we also are, as we are completing these processes, you can see how the cost has just escalated, and stakeholders have continued to rise to the occasion. They've contributed over 86% of the total cost to date.
David, do you mind if I interrupt you?
Sure.
If you were going to, is it a multiplicity of things that have made it cost more, just the fact that it is such a complex area and every area has a different You can't, there's not a one-size-fits-all either problem or solution. Is that why it's costing so much? Because as you look at it, you see it's even more complex than one might have thought.
Well, that hits a lot on it. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And salt's a little bit of a different animal. I mean, when we look at water quality regulation, we usually say, okay, well, what's the most sensitive use? And we pick that number and we go with it. And the thing is if we do that in the Central Valley, we might as well say goodbye to agriculture. We might as well say goodbye to the community. We've got to make, this is something that we've got to make work. It's, as Jeannie said at the beginning, it's something that has to be managed. And to figure out the way that we can manage this and still stay sustainable, and that's economically, environmentally, socially, those are really important goals. So we're really trying to find that right solution, and then also develop the regulatory framework to make that work.
On the big ticket item there, just to discuss it a little bit, was the stakeholder contributions for treatment alternatives. So that's, I'm imagining, having done treatability studies, you know, that you can burn a lot of money doing that. But what is that work in academic areas? Is it work by consulting engineers? And you know, what specific GIS mapping? I noticed. What are some of the big ticket items that are costing a lot in terms of this upfront analysis of alternatives?
Well, I know on the stakeholder, and I'm going to let Jeannie talk about a little bit on the other part of it, but I know on the stakeholder part, on those that count on that, certainly those pilot projects are really, there's one down the Tulare Lake Basin that's probably our biggest ticket item there, just getting those pilots. There's also some that are the studies where you've gone out and gotten a consultant out there and done this. So there's a mixture, but I'm going to let her.
Yeah, and Debbie actually hit one of the key ones that's driving that particular expense. As she said, we've only listed a few of the many different pilot projects that are going on out there, but one of the ones that we listed is in the Tulare Lake Basin, where we do have more salt. Well, it's a closed basin, so the salt's continuing to increase in that basin. And so the Tulare Lake Drainage District has spent several millions of dollars trying to figure out ways of improving their evaporation pond systems, trying to figure out if there's a way of actually utilizing the salt to a beneficial purpose, actually screening it out, breaking it into its elements to have maybe something that they could actually retail and make it actually a viable economic return for dealing with it. But you still have to deal with the brine. They're trying to find ways of reducing the amount of actual brine and waste that they need to deal with. But that's the huge ticket item.
I have a follow-up on that. I was actually on a tour in that area, and I'm just wondering if it's the area that I saw is part of the pilot, New Sky.
Yeah, the New Sky is one of many pilot projects that they're looking at right now.
So on the Central Valley Salinity Coalition, one of the benefits, as I told you, we have some things where we do direct contributions, and we're doing projects and it doesn't go through CV Salts. But with the Salinity Coalition, what we've been able to do is actually co-partner, co-fund, or contract fund some of the work that needed to be done. But there's other costs that are involved. We have 2.6 that we've done so far. There's other costs that are involved. We almost have 1.2 million in meetings. It's amazing. The amount of work that's needed. And no, I know I mean, we laugh about it, but you know, you've seen me up here before advocating for stakeholder process. As tedious as they can be, they are so important on getting to an understanding and a solution and getting people behind something. And it takes a lot, and it takes a lot of back and forth. And this is just an idea about what that might be.
Debbie, before you move on, since you opened the door for me, I noticed that in the membership listing, there aren't any environmental or environmental justice or community organization, or at least that I could see from a quick glance. Do they participate in the discussion?
We do have them. So the coalition is the funding part, and so they haven't participated in providing funding for that part. During the executive committee policy meetings and any other committee of CV Salts, anybody is welcome to participate. The executive committee actually has some voting slots. There's at least one slot, if not a couple, that are there for those groups to step in. We know Clean Water Action has been involved. There's been a lot of outreach to different groups. We're working, this coalition itself is working with a group, and I don't know if JP's in the audience today, but in order to help some of for nitrate, the solutions for nitrate and the solutions for these communities, there's a group that's working on developing those solutions. We look at it and say, well, and I'm going to speak as a POTW person, but better than a community saying, oh, we're going to fix your problem the way we want to. They're deciding how they're wanting to do it. As a coalition member, we're looking at it saying, how can we help this process, facilitate this process, whether it's through grants or through, how can we help make this process? But we're not the ones that are deciding this is how you're going to fix this. And the overall CV salts, and as David gets into some of these management solutions, he'll talk a little bit more about how we'll get more localized and have more local solutions.
Let me just chime in a little bit and give you a chance to rest your voice as well. But in reference to your question, I think it's important to point out the structure of CV salts. There's the broad policy part of CV salts, which is the executive committee. Debbie is the vice chair of the executive committee. Perry Clausen in the back somewhere is the chair of that process. That's a very broad process. That's where all the decisions are made. That's where all the policy discussions take place. It's an open public meetings in which we have the agencies there. There's a representative from the state board attends. Regional board is actively involved in that and sits on that committee, the environmental justice community. And basically anybody who wants to attend can be there, participate, and we encourage that, so that we have that broad policy discussion, and you don't have to basically pay to be in that room and discuss those policy issues. The Salinity Coalition is the separate sort of funding process. So we realize that we need to have someone to help fund this, that the state board only put up the $5 million, which seems like a lot. We never envisioned that would be enough to accomplish this mission. So the Salinity Coalition is a nonprofit organization that is that does the funding for CV salts. So that is made up of the list that we talked about that Debbie put forth. So it's important to keep in mind that the coalition, really all we do is try and figure out how to fund the process. The policy, all those choices and all those things are done in the broader CV salts executive committee, which is, involves everyone.
I have yeah, this is great. For Jeannie, there are, right now, all the regions are putting together their salt nutrient plans if they need to. And there are there's some work that's going on in some of the regions. For example, West Valley has installed and has started operating a biological treatment for salts. It's not your salts, but it's other salts, but it can work for salts. How are you incorporating or touching base with these other efforts outside this Region 5?
We're actually participating in the roundtable, the Recycle Water Policy Roundtable, so we can stay on top of other efforts that are ongoing. We're actually coordinated with the Groundwater Resource Association, who has been doing various webinars on the various topics so that we can stay up on it. And in fact, CV Salts is on the schedule to give our own webinar tomorrow afternoon.
Right.
So we are trying to keep tabs on the other issues that are going on throughout the state with those forums. And again, we try to do as much outreach as we can at various conferences. In fact, there's a Salinity conference that's coming up in June in Riverside, and we will be participating in that as well. So yes, it's extremely important, and that's part of the implementation planning, is to know what's working in other areas, and if there's any way that we can actually use some of those or a version of those technologies in the Central Valley. So it is a huge issue, and it is something we're trying to track.
So looking at, and you're probably going to get into this as you go forward, but looking at the pilot projects, is there also an effort on behalf of or by the policy committee to look at broader regional solutions in terms of actual projects?
Yeah, definitely there is, and that's part of the whole SWRCB and trying to figure out how you can do regional projects as well as, sort of, but yes, there is. And we're looking at all those regional projects in the Central Valley and see how they fit together in a comprehensive program that maintains the salt balance and protects uses for drinking water and for all other beneficial uses.
One thing I want to, before leaving the slide, point out is if you look at especially that bottom number, that 43.5 million for implementation-related efforts, that again is an understatement as to what's doing it. And the important message to let you know is we're not waiting to implement stuff before, as the salt and nutrient management plan is being developed. It's happening now. I did want to give you a sampling of some of the other activities, and some of them are permit required. Here's a list of a few of these things. There's other activities that we've talked about that are much more. These are outlined a little bit more in your package, but they typically are there and beyond. And even for someone that, my membership which holds permits, they're looking for there and beyond also. And so there's a definite commitment to addressing this. I'm going to pass this over to David Corey, and he'll continue with some of the accomplishments.
Okay, and again, we encourage your questions in the middle because I think that's a better dialogue, and we want to really, it's an update to the board, so the things that you're interested in, please, focus on those.
Right, and also listeners who may not understand the issue. These are always an opportunity for people beyond this room to understand really complex issues.
Yeah, and that's a good point. This is an incredibly complex issue. But my name is David Corey with the San Joaquin Valley Drainage Authority and the West Side Coalition, the chair of the Central Valley Salinity Coalition, which is sort of the funding group of CV Salt's policy group, or a co-funder anyway. I even trained on pushing this button, didn't get it right the first time. The strategy and framework, really, over the past year, we've really focused a lot on these issues, coming up with revising the regulatory structure, looking at beneficial uses, water quality objectives, and some of the broad policies that drive our regulatory approach, and making sure that these things line up in a way that